Okay, welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Land Use and Ethics Subcommittee. I am once again your host, Delegate Vaughn Stewart. It's great to see everyone. We're going to have a very short work session and voting session today consisting of only 2 bills. Before we jump into it, I just wanted to note, since we have a couple people who are here this week that weren't here last week, just in terms of ground rules of the subcommittee, if you have any amendments, if you have any questions about anything, just let me know. If you want to hold a piece of legislation for another week, basically special order it, that's generally something we're going to allow pretty liberally here early on in session. As we get closer to crossover, that's probably something that we're not going to be able to use quite as judiciously. But if you do want to hold a bill, try to let me know in advance. But if you can, if it's something that just kind of occurs to you in the middle of the meeting, that's something that we will try to honor as long as we can. So with that, we're going to jump into it. If Colleen, if you can pull up the agenda. And by the way, I'm not sure I introduced her, but Colleen Herman is my chief of staff, and so she's going to be your go-to person for any subcommittee questions in terms of scheduling and links and agendas and people coming in to chat with us. Here's the agenda. Yes, Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really quickly, procedurally, on a hold, 2 questions. Do you have to give a reason for it? And I assume you're limited to asking for a hold just one time.
That's correct. Each person is not going to be able to hold a particular bill more than once. In terms of a reason, that would be nice to know. It's a little bit random to just say I hold the bill with no rationale, but I don't think that it's strictly required to give a rationale, but it would be nice to know if you're holding it because you have questions or you want to touch base with an advocate or you're waiting for an amendment to be drafted. That would all be helpful information to know. So if you can provide some context for the hold, that would be appreciated.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so as you can see, we've got just 2 bills on the schedule. We did wait. We're going to wait one more week on my mobile homes bill, HB 23. We walked through those amendments. We have a couple more amendment tweaks that we're working on. I think that bill will be ready for prime time next week for a possible vote, but I think we're going to hold it for one more week. And so this is going to be a relatively short meeting. First, I'd like to just go ahead and take back up HB 32. This is a bill that we did discuss last week. It's pretty straightforward. It has no fiscal note, and it's something that basically is already in existence. This Resiliency Council. This bill, if you guys remember, essentially just makes it permanent. So this is something that we passed in 2021 on a temporary basis. There was a report release that basically recommended and that has a number of recommendations related to food system resilience. And in order to basically see those recommendations through, the bill would essentially establish the permanent council to effectuate them. So I do not believe there are any amendments. Delegate Holmes.
And that was going to be my question, Chairman Stewart.
Yes.
A, are there any amendments? And B, does the bill as written, is it the same as the one that was passed last year? Those are my 2 questions, Mr. Chair.
Well, I can answer the second one, which is that it's not the exact same as the bill that passed in 2021, but it's substantially similar. In 2021, we essentially created this council as a temporary council that sunsetted. This bill just makes the council permanent. So it's different in that respect. Otherwise, it's similar or identical.
Delegate Stewart, may I add just a clarification?
Please do.
So there was actually no sunset on this food council. It is a permanent council. There was language within the provisions of the law that made it seem like it was intended on a temporary basis, but it did not have a sunset. So this is an existing council, and what this bill does is that it officially places it within MDEM.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thanks, Kristen. Delegate Long.
Thank you, Delegate Stewart. Question: We're not doing any amendments referencing adding additional parties into the council.
Well, I was going to refer to Delegate Naraki. I know that he was going to take a look at that amendment. Delegate Naraki, I don't know if you had a chance to pursue that or if you have any interest in doing so.
So I believe, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. I believe that Delegate Jacobs was going to offer that amendment. I did speak with him the other day in committee, but I'm not sure where he's at with that.
Okay.
So I have not heard from Delegate Jacobs, but just to point out, House Bill 1083, which Delegate Jacobs is sponsoring along with Delegate Ahrens, establishes the Invasive Species Coalition within this Food System Resiliency Council. So there'll be an opportunity, I think, to have some of these discussions. I'm not sure if it's a different issue that he's trying to address here, but I'm just saying that there is another bill that relates to this council, and it would be, to address and eradicate invasive species.
Okay. That's helpful to know. Yeah, I mean, I think I have not heard from Delegate Jacobs either. I think my preference would just be to go ahead and if there is interest in taking a vote. Delegate Jacobs would have one more bite at the apple in full committee if he really wanted to tack something on. Delegate Holmes?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move favorable on the bill as written. And if there is someone from the full committee that wants to offer an amendment, then our members can offer that amendment in full committee, Mr. Chair. Therefore, I move favorable on HB 32.
I second.
Okay, there is a favorable motion and a second on the floor. Or is there any more discussion on the favorable motion? Seeing none, we will move to a vote. All those in favor of this bill, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Are there any abstentions? Okay, it looks like we've got roughly a unanimous vote of those present, and this bill has passed. So congrats, guys. We have passed our first bill out of the subcommittee for the 23 session. Fun times. Okay, House Bill 32 passes. We're now going to move to House Bill 9 just for discussion only. This is the transit equity bill from Delegate Ruth. If you are a returning member of committee, you will remember this bill because it did pass the House and the Senate last year, but it was vetoed by the governor. Delegate Ruth has a few amendments, but not all of them have been formally drafted. So we're not, and the bill also has a fiscal note. So we're not really in a position for multiple reasons where we can take a vote on this right now, but I wanted to at least give us a few minutes today to walk through some of the proposed amendments that we might be looking at so that everyone has some familiarity with it. Just for everyone's recollection, essentially what the bill does is require the Department of Transportation to collaborate with MTA, the Transit Administration, to perform a transit equity analysis, a cost benefit analysis, some consultations with relevant groups, and other actions related to equity when one of two things happens. First, if there is a service change, that would qualify as a major service change. And secondly, if there is a reduction or cancellation of a capital expansion project that's in the CTP, the Consolidated Transportation Program. One of those two triggers would essentially trigger the variety of analysis and study that is contemplated by the bill. This is basically in the same form that we did pass last year and it was vetoed. However, there are a couple of, I think, relatively minor amendments. And Colleen, if you have those, we can go ahead and put those up. These are not drafted by DLS formally. This is more of just sort of discussion purposes of what we might be seeing next week. So it looks like that basically, sorry, Delegate Lehman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question on the cancellation of a project in the CTP. Is that limited to outright cancellation, or would that potentially include a project that makes it into that top tier? I think usually it's the top 3 projects that end up getting funded if it dropped way down, if it went from being a priority project to being so far down on the list, it's, doesn't have a prayer of getting funded.
I know that reductions in the scope of a project also count. It doesn't have to be a full cancellation, but to your specific question about lower priority ranking, I'm going to defer to Patrick, who is making his first appearance this session. before this subcommittee, but is our transportation guru for the transportation related bills that the subcommittee will discuss.
Well, the bill itself requires the Transit Administration to set transit equity thresholds above which the reduction would qualify. So it wouldn't be every reduction if you canceled a purchase of a train car or a transit bus, but under the threshold set by MTA, which the bill requires them. So we don't have those thresholds yet, but the MTA would be required to establish those thresholds.
So there's like a reduction formula, in other words, but we don't have
There
that
is.
yet.
Correct. It's required in the bill, though.
Gotcha. Okay, so that will be done, that will be handled like through regulations?
Regulation, MTA guidance, something like that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this first group of amendments here that you see is related to an issue that I think that the amendment drafter had about the use of a phrase that says can reasonably be obtained, because just the word reasonably is not well defined. It's a classic, sort of legal phrase. It's open to lots of interpretations. So this is the alternative language that the advocate sort of came up with to basically stand in for reasonably. And at this point on this amendment, I'm going to call on Ms. Schmidt-Perkins, who I believe is one of the advocates who's been involved with the bill and possibly these amendment discussions too, just to see if she can add any more context for us.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, I think that these amendments address the issue of making sure that people with disabilities are treated equally under this bill as other organizations and other people that we're trying to make sure have the transportation equity. And it was just our best way of cleaning up this language.
Right. Okay. Great. So
this is my first time actually seeing the results of this request.
Okay.
So I'm operating a little bit on the fly here. Yes. But it was critical for some of the people that were advocating for the bill, but wanting to see these changes to make sure that that everybody was treated equally within this bill analysis.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then this next group of amendments, starting with conducting a transit equity analysis in accordance with the Title VI requirements. This relates to some suggestions by Disability Rights Maryland that would add disability status to the definition of disparate impact. MDOT had concerns about this because disability is not included in Title VI. And so because the standards of Title VI and the ADA are distinct under federal law, MDOT was concerned about sort of conflating them and mixing them up. And so because of that, these amendments are meant to sort of account for disability in the bill without actually adding it to the definition of disparate impact. That's at least my understanding. And then this last amendment here is very straightforward, and it's basically just from some favorable with amendment testimony from construction organizations asking to add a construction representative to the advisory committee. The sponsor is sort of neutral on this. She does think that if we are going to sort of open the floodgates up to adding more people, which is going to be an issue that comes up before the subcommittee over and over, should we add people to work groups? She does think that if we open the floodgates, she'd like to add a representative from the senior committee as well, because AERP has requested this. And so if we're going to do a construction, she wants to do a senior committee. I don't really have strong views either way. I think having both perspectives would be nice, but I think ultimately up to the committee whether we adopt those amendments. But that's all we're working with right now. I think we'll probably get more precise language on some of this stuff once it goes through the formal DLS process. So we should have a better sense of the bill and the amendments, but I think, it will be in a profoundly similar form as last session. Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I'm asking is that we're going to have copies of the amendments, and okay, that's all I'm asking. So we can put those together and see how it goes into the entire bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, we will have more formal sent to everyone to make sure you have a chance to review them before we vote on this. I just thought it would be useful, since we had a relatively light schedule today anyway, for us to go ahead and at least introduce the concept of the bill, especially for the new members who have not necessarily discussed it before. But yeah, we'll make sure we get all that to you. Thanks. So with that, I think we're done with the amendment discussion and the bill discussion. I will just kick it back to members of the subcommittee if you have any questions that we can pose to probably Patrick about the bill or the amendments. Seeing none, I think we can conclude discussion for today. We will make sure you guys have all the amendments and all the language from DLS on HB 9. We are out in record time. Hope everyone can get some food before hearings start at 1. And thank you all very much. See you next week.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep. Sorry.
Just for the record, we have put in a request to leadership in the Appropriations Committee on the fiscal note in this bill. We're just waiting for that.
Thank you, Patrick. That's a good flag. Yeah, as you'll note, one of the reasons we can't vote amendments aside is that the fiscal note is sizable as it was last year. It's about in the years once the bill takes effect, you're looking at roughly $500,000 per year. But yeah, thanks, Patrick. We have already flagged that issue for the Appropriations Committee. And so outside of the substantive analysis of the bill, we are going to have to make sure we can just afford it, given the altered fiscal status of the state, as we heard about in the briefing. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious if we need a motion to adjourn.
We don't need a motion, but
okay.
but thank you though. We're just going to adjourn now.